you're losing the narrative in India. Israelis aren't talking. Trump is doing all the talking. We need Israelis talking about Israel in India. We can't have Trump talking about Israeli interests in India.
Prime Minister Modi recently elevated India-Israel relations to a special strategic partnership during his visit to Israel. But just days later, the region was thrown into turmoil. The United States and Israel launched major attacks on Iran, including the killing of Iran's supreme leader, Ayatollah Ali Khamenei. Iran has since installed his son, Mojtaba Khamenei, as the new supreme leader. India has called the situation deeply concerning and urged restraint and diplomacy, but has stopped short of directly condemning the strike itself. Meanwhile, the stakes for India are enormous. Oil prices have surged past $100 a barrel. The Strait of Hormuz is under severe pressure, and nearly 9 million Indians live and work across the Gulf region. So the question now isn't philosophical, it's strategic. Abhijit, welcome again to our show.
Thank you for having me again, Daniel.
Where exactly does India stand in this moment? If you can take us through your thoughts on the current situation.
So India's position on this entire thing comes from a counter-terrorism perspective, right? Which is that we don't believe that one man's, a freedom fighter is another man's terrorist. All terrorism is indivisible and all terrorists need to be condemned. That said, the way our priorities in this particular thing go is our diaspora in the Gulf, which is about 10 million strong right now, slightly less than 10 million. And it is the oil which, accounts for about 55 to 60% of our total oil imports over the years. Sequentially, that would be the priority list. Now, the third thing in all of this is, if you combine the two priorities, you see how India has responded to this. There has been no condemnation of the American-Israeli strike on Iran. There has been condemnation of Iran's strike on all the neighbors that have significant Indian populations, without caveating or mentioning the US-Israeli strikes on Iran. And it's been very, very clear that, we need peace and dialogue. I think that's one of the throwaways that we add, after everything. It's like you guys say shalom for everything. We end all our prayers in all our holy books with Om Shanti, 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 which is peace, peace. It's salam, salam, salam. Shalom, shalom, shalom. 3 times over. So same thing. So there's been a mix of pro forma and the official requirements very clearly for those who bother to read between the lines.
Now, some people say Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel was at a shaky time. Maybe he's getting some backlash for that. What are your thoughts?
It's not the backlash that's hurting the BJP. Basically, what the opposition is saying is Bibi briefed Modi and Modi gave the go-ahead. And we're sitting here and thinking, yeah, man, like really, like either Bibi or especially Trump really need Modi to green light, because, Modi is the emperor of the whole world and he gives permission to great Emperor Trump to go in and do what he wants when he wants it, and he edits Trump's written statements and stuff like that. Give me a break. Not happening, right? If anything, I think Netanyahu's on the record saying we were ready to go in by the 3rd, but Modi coming in actually stalled that attack for about 5-6 days because we couldn't risk the security of a visiting head of government going to war. And then, of course, the opportunity presented itself where Khamenei met his entire war cabinet underground, and that was too ripe an opportunity to pass up, kind of thing. This has been one thing. But what has surprised me is, India was absolutely solidly behind Israel throughout the Gaza thing, when the rest of the world was howling at Israel. And even more behind Israel the last time during Operation Rising Lion, when last year Israel struck Iran. This time it is not so. It is very muted, and there isn't criticism of Israel, but there is a lot of criticism of America. And there's a reason for it. Indians always like underdogs, and you compare tiny little Israel to huge Iran, we know exactly who the underdog is. They may not be the military underdog, but size-wise, they are underdogs, right? And it was very clear messaging that we're doing this for self-preservation. We can't allow them to go nuclear. The Iranians keep cheating, whatever, whatever. This time, Trump has really muddled up the message, and I'm afraid the Israelis haven't done any favors by keeping a clean message either. They seem to be more interested in echoing Trump's message rather than maintaining signal clarity throughout this particular conflict. So, oh, we want regime change. Oh, we don't want regime change. Oh, it's going to be a 4-day campaign and then we're going to stop and then start again. Oh, we're going to go on for 30 days. Like, really, I mean, somebody needs to be on message out here. It's not helping that there isn't any message. And I think the reason there's an equivalence now in India over this, though to be fair, it's mostly blamed on the Americans, is that it's a huge Indian population, a very high disposable income Indian population in the Gulf that's getting attacked. And, it's obviously nobody likes Iran out here, but there are a whole load of Shias who are mourning. Thankfully, none of their protests got violent. The one protest that did get violent was because the Sunnis came and pelted them with stones again. So, we have very high disposable income Shias who are very civilized, unlike, say, Lebanese low disposable income Shias.
Now, the killing of Ali Khamenei may be one of the most consequential events in the modern Middle East. But from India's perspective, is this a destabilizing move or somehow beneficial?
So India never condoled his killing, which is saying a lot. India normally has no hesitations about condoling even the death of horrible Pakistani dictators. But there has not been an official condolence for Khamenei. The foreign secretary went to the Iranian embassy and signed the condolence book. But remember, the foreign secretary is much lower the protocol change than the foreign minister. So it was a fairly low level representation in the overall scheme of things out there. The government isn't really looking at the impact on Iran. It's more focused, all the analyses and number crunching right now are, what if we have to evacuate our population? How much of the private airlines can we temporarily nationalize or incentivize to bring back our population? Can we get a ceasefire done just to bring out, like we did in Ukraine for 2-3 days, to get our students out of Kharkiv and places like that. But personally, I can tell you, I personally feel it was a mistake removing Khamenei, because his redundancy seems to have been to put the IRGC into, free launch mode. I don't know if you saw that Telegram message where they essentially give the middle finger to President Pezeshkian and say, you're weak, you're spine. I mean, they didn't say weak and spineless, but they basically told him, stiffen your spine, bro. And, Pezeshkian's statement, he didn't apologize. I don't know where Trump got this thing. He apologized. I sent it to several Farsi speakers and they're like, bro, he never apologized there. He condoled the deaths of the schoolgirls in Minab. He talked about resistance and the will of the Iranian people. And he asked the people to stay brave and continue their fight. There was no apology. I don't know where Twitter or whatever saw the apology or heard the apology. It certainly wasn't there in that speech. I think the issue right now is, well, if you'd asked me this question yesterday, I would have told you it's the horns of dilemma. Do you allow the 88-member assembly of experts to meet without bombing them? It's such a juicy target. 88 absolutely vile characters who are getting together. Why would you not bomb them? Just to stop the attacks on the Gulf, which are causing a lot of tension between the Gulf states and America? Or do you let them meet and choose a guy so that he can tell the IRGC to stop the attacks on the Gulf states? Now, the problem is they've chosen Mojtaba, who I really don't know what to make of. Now, in all my trips to Iran, nobody has a good opinion of him. They'll keep pointing to these very posh houses. He apparently owns several houses up in the hills of Tehran. Horribly corrupt fellow, absolutely no qualms, no morals. He's probably the type that recites the Quran in the morning and eats pork in the afternoon. Maybe not that far, I'm being hyperbolistic, but he's not a nice guy. I have never met an Iranian who liked Mojtaba Khamenei. Not one. Even the hijabis who I've met, many of whom are my friends, and these are people who think Khamenei was a holy man, but they don't share the same opinion about his son. Now, maybe This is a good thing. Maybe Mojtaba is the Delcy Rodriguez of Iran. Precisely because he is so compromised, he might actually be open to leverage. Now, even here, we need to make a difference. Ideologically driven people are venal. Hitler was known to have amassed billions of Deutschmark worth of private property, just, seizing property and things like that. But he was very ideological. He doubled down on the Holocaust when the tide turned in the East. He didn't reduce it and, send troops to fight in the East. He prioritized the Holocaust over other things. Now, that is venality. Corruption is a whole different game, because if he is compromised with his houses in London and things, why is it that every Russian yacht and villa was seized in the West or frozen in the West? But nothing of Mojtaba Khamenei has ever been seized or whatever, right? And maybe his fanaticism is, when you're a spy, you have to be more fanatic to show your loyalty, right? I mean, nobody's gonna make the supreme leader a guy who says, oh no, the Jews are our brothers. You'll only make a guy supreme leader when he says, oh yeah, kill all the Jews, drink all their blood. I mean, destruction isn't enough, whatever. So, but the question is, how do you make that call? Is he compromised or is he an actual believer? I don't know. I'd like to think he's compromised by the Israelis, but I fear he may not. That said, he's known amongst my Iranian circles as quite a hot-headed idiot. And that is problematic. I was personally thinking they would choose Ayatollah Mir Bakeri he's a horrible man. I mean, he made the elder Khamenei look like a moderate, but well, they've gone with Mojtaba. Good luck to them. Let's see. I think in the next 2-3 months, Daniel, we'll know if he's his father's son or if he's the Delcy Rodriguez of
You actually addressed my next question. I was going to ask you if Mojtaba's leadership is going to make Iran more predictable or more dangerous. I'm thinking he might want to avenge the deaths of his own people in his own family, so that might make him more dangerous, but who knows? I was going to ask you also, what are your thoughts on Iran just lashing out at 12, 13 different countries? And what do you make of that?
Desperate but smart. Desperate because, look, from Rising Lion, you remember in the last stages of Rising Lion when America bombed, when the B-2s came and bombed the underground facilities, the Iranians attacked two American bases, I think in Bahrain and Qatar, or was it just Qatar? I forget. So we did expect fallout on American bases in Kuwait, in Bahrain, and in the UAE and Qatar. But to then go around attacking civilian infrastructure out there, like hotels, high rises, facilities of the local military, not of the Americans. Big surprise. Attacking airports, civilian airports, big surprise. That said, when people do things like that, it usually reeks of desperation. And yet, that said again, it's also really smart because it spreads the cost of the war, a disproportionate cost of the war, onto the Gulf allies of America. And it essentially creates a security dilemma for the Americans. Do we protect Israel first? Do we protect the Gulf first? How do we spread out our defensive resources? And, the distance between the Gulf and Iran is much, much smaller than the distance between Israel and Iran. So you're going to have a lot more stock of things to throw at the Gulf, which means the defensive requirements for the Gulf are going to be that much more. So it's also a financial dilemma in addition to a strategic dilemma and therefore an asset allocation dilemma. Desperate but smart, huh? I hate to say this in regards to this, but I'm actually impressed.
If internal unrest spreads inside Iran, does India quietly prefer a regime survival or a regime collapse? And which scenario worries India more, a strong, hostile Iran or a fragmented, unstable Iran?
India would not like regime change out there at all. What we want is an isolated and contained Iran. So status quo as before 28th February would have been optimal, but excuse me, we won't want to see the regime gone. The maintenance of the Shia-Sunni split is absolutely crucial for us. Now, understand, with Israel, It was good, say, in the 90s to maybe early 2000s when Hezbollah and Hamas would not cooperate. And then somehow Iran got their fangs into Hamas, a Sunni organization. And for you, the Shia Sunni split does not have any meaning. Israelis sitting and watching this would go, well, I mean, if there was a Shia Sunni split, we certainly never heard about it. Yeah. But in India, it's still a very, very big deal. It's absolutely crucial for us that Iran and Pakistan don't gang up, that Iran's isolation doesn't end. It is not just the Shia Sunni split. We need an isolated Iran that cannot lend resources to Pakistan and cannot mend its fences with Pakistan. That is crucial. Now, I am always in awe of Indian diplomacy that we've turned the Taliban into our friends and brothers. In case I didn't mention, they're highly feminist, progressive, socialist, secular, forward thinking, lovely folks. You're laughing. Don't laugh. I've smoked hashish with them. I've been there in Ghor and Ghazni and smoked hashish with them. They're lovely people. But even given the ability of Indian diplomacy to turn Sunni against Sunni and make friends, this isn't a headache we want. We would rather the status quo continued. If it changed, it wouldn't be our preferred option. It'll require an expending of more resources. But well, we'll we'll cross that bridge. But the preferred option is that the regime doesn't fall.
Now, India has long championed strategic autonomy. Do you think that this is the biggest test yet of that doctrine?
Yes, and I think India's passed with flying colors. We've made our position very clear to those who want to hear it, but we're not going to get involved in other people's fights. I don't think people realize this, but American ships have freedom to dock at our ports at any time and get refueled and repaired and things. I'm not going to say any more than that right now. But we've kept out of this pretty well. We've given refuge to an Iranian ship. There were two Iranian ships that had come to our naval fleet review on the 25th and 20th of last month. One of them, the Americans, sank. The resupply vessel has asked for refuge and it has been given refuge. So I think that's what strategic autonomy is. And at Raisina, which is India's version of the Munich Security Conference, or I know the security version of Davos, I guess, the Indian version, both Gideon Sar came and did an interview. Well, he did it online, not in person. And the deputy foreign minister of Iran, Khatibzadeh, he came and gave quite a fiery interview, sat down with the foreign minister and shook hands with him and things like that. So I think as long as we keep ourselves out of trouble and we make it very clear that we're not condemning Israel or America, and we are condemning Iran for what it did to the Gulf, which is where our primary interest lies, I think that's strategic autonomy. I think that's a very good application of strategic autonomy.
But do you think that India could realistically maintain strong long-term relations simultaneously with Israel, Iran, the Gulf states, Russia, and the United States? It seems like it's the only country that has relations with all of them.
Look, with Iran, we don't have very good relations. With Russia, we do. And that, stems from a shared threat assessment of China, just as it does with America as well. With Israel, it's the shared threat of Islamist terrorism, but that's like we discussed the last time, that's a very small part of it, which Indians, because, security is sexy, it tends to hog all the headlines. There is a huge technology dialogue going on between us. There's a huge agricultural cooperation and agriculture and water cooperation, things which are probably just as important, if not more important. There is political coordination that happens between us, again, very important. With the Gulf states, they understand where we're coming from. We've massaged their egos and done our groundwork out there to see to it that it remains, because it's never been a zero-sum game. It's never been, it's either us or them. We don't ask people for things, right? We don't tell the UAE, buddy, you need to do this for us, and therefore something for you. We've got populations in all those countries that are contributing to their economies. So it's mutual leverage. So you don't add more points of stress onto mutual leverage. Evenly balanced. Iran is the odd man out because we don't have a large diaspora in Iran. And the one we wanted to have a big project which was the Chabahar port, which is the port that is right outside the Straits of Hormuz, almost on the Pakistan border. And we wanted that to play our little games in Afghanistan. The Iranians never let us operationalize it. They never let us finish the Zaranj Delaram highway, which would have connected Chabahar to all 5 Afghan cities. Is left unfinished 20 kilometers to this day. About 30 years after it began, it has been left unfinished 20 kilometers on the Iranian side because they just won't let us finish it. Right. So there's no point in us saying it's a good relationship, because also remember that as long as there were sanctions on Iran, they keep coming to India and saying, oh, we have such great shared cultural ties. You produced more Farsi poetry and literature for 200 years than Iran did. And Farsi was your official court language. And then when the sanctions get lifted, they're like, oh, you brown people, spelly people, we don't want to associate with you. Darkies, go away, shoo, shoo, shoo. Um, they're very racist. I don't know if you know this, but they're super duper racist in Iran. And I literally had a friend ask me, Abhi, do you think you're dark because you eat so much spice? I'm like, huh, what? Because, if you eat spice, it turns you dark. She's pretty damn educated, right? That's isn't your run-of-the-mill madrasa graduate kind of thing. So uh, let's just say we don't have the best. We've never had the best of relations with Iran. Iran's always been a disposable asset.
Okay. So some analysts say that India and Israel are entering a civilizational alignment. Do you think that that's accurate or it's overstated?
No, I think it's accurate because Israel was created as a multi-ethnic state for Jews. The religion bound multiple ethnicities of Jews with significant equal rights and prosperity for the minorities, both Christian and Muslim. India wants the exact same things. Our ideation myth, our creation myth has been, it was one country united in its struggle against the British. Now, that's not 75 years on, that's not enough to hold us together because, you have to create substance and salience. 70-year-old conflict can't hold you together. So, what bound us together? And increasingly, it's the concept of Hindutva, which is what keeps getting voted with large majorities in parliament. And Hindutva is, if you talk to all these left-wing professors, they'll tell you, oh, it's just Nazism with saffron characteristics, whatever nonsense that is. But what it is basically that Hindus need to set aside internal differences of diet, of practices, of caste, of ethnicity, and focus on their being Hindus first and foremost. And second, start focusing on economic development and things. And for Muslims, Christians, everybody to have an equal stake in it, just be Indian in your outlook. Don't go around saying stuff like, oh, our ancestors came from Arabia. Bro, you're as dark as me. You ain't coming from Arabia. You're just as black as I am, and you smell of spices just as bad as I do.
Now, oil prices have surged over $100 a barrel. If that persists, where does India feel the pain first? Is it inflation? Is it currency pressure? Is it domestic politics? What are your thoughts on that?
So there is a big buffer because, we have huge taxes on oil. I would say 90% of what we pay for oil is actually taxes to the government. And that goes into the kitty to fund all the social schemes and welfare schemes and things like that. There is a huge buffer for the government to absorb the increase in oil prices. They've already started diversifying, buying American oil, Venezuelan oil, and Russian oil, hence the so-called 30-day waiver, which we never stopped buying Russian oil, but the 30-day waiver that America has given us. That said, if it does go up, there is room. There is room for it to double, treble, maybe without prices doubling, trebling, just for government revenue on account of taxes to go down. But yes, the worry really is inflationary pressure, which then has all kinds of impacts. It has impacts on politics because in, I think, April or May, there are 4 huge states, crucial states going to election. The 2 eastern states of Bengal and Assam, which have huge Muslim populations, the state of Tamil Nadu and Kerala, which have very significant Christian populations, and Kerala also has a huge Muslim population. So those are states you don't really want to be, 4 state elections you don't want to be playing with. And that's their real worry right now.
Now, if the Strait of Hormuz becomes unstable, does India quietly recalibrate its diplomacy? What about the prolonged energy shocks? Would that force India to become more publicly critical of the conflict?
No, because the energy shocks will last for about a month or 2 months in between till the entire market recalibrates. I think we need to look at oil prices throughout the last few during the Gulf War, except when the Arabs do a concerted embargo. Like the only time India got badly affected was after the Yom Kippur War, when the Arabs did an actual, oil embargo, cartelized and weaponized the prices of oil, which then along led to huge social disruption in India. And that led to emergency being imposed, which was the only time emergency has been imposed, and elections were postponed by a year, and civil rights were suspended. So that lasted for something like 2, 3 years, precisely because of the shocks of that embargo. But natural oil instability is something we've been able to handle. So maybe it'll last for a month, but then we're very optimistic we're able to control it.
Now, if Iran weakens significantly, how does that affect Pakistan strategically?
Well, Pakistan itself is so weak at the moment. I mean, look, Iran's going to be strong vis-a-vis Pakistan, irrespective of a regular military. Even with paramilitary strength, it can control the border, it can police the border, and it can hold its own against Pakistan. And remember, Iran also has the options of mending its fences with the Taliban. And the Taliban seem to be very eager to liberate the huge swath. Almost half of Pakistan is not half, maybe one third of Pakistan is occupied Afghan territory. So, God bless the freedom fighters of Afghanistan. And I'm sure we can always make our facilitation services available to bridge that gap as and when it arises.
Do you think that the instability inside Iran could spill into Balochistan, which would affect both Iran and Pakistan?
I don't think the Iranians want instability on their land borders, which is why they're not activating. I mean, they're activating Shia militias in Iraq to attack American bases in the Kurdish areas, but they're not instigating Shia Sunni fights. I don't see what purpose a Shia Sunni fight in Balochistan, or, well, it won't happen in Balochistan because Balochistan is Sunni. Remember, there is their Balochistan province, which is called Sistan wa Balochistan, is also a Sunni majority province. The two southern east and west tips, Khuzestan is the Arab Sunni province, and Sistan Balochistan near Pakistan is the Baloch Sunni province. They are very disturbed. There may be some counter-terrorism, some insurgency uptick in Iranian Balochistan. And the thing is, it doesn't matter that the Pakistani Baloch are Sunni, they're more than happy to take weapons from Shia Iran. Which is why, if you look at the language of Baloch rebels in Pakistan, they never invoke Islam. They're a secular movement. I mean, they're not secular in practice, but in their messaging and opposition to the Pakistani state, they are secular. It's Sunni versus Sunni. Whereas in Balochi rebels in Iran do frequently use a religious terminology. So I think we're fine. I mean, I might be overestimating the capacity of the Indian state, the Iranian state, and underestimating the capacity of the Pakistani state, but I think I'll hold on to my analysis for now.
Now, two of Iran's major allies are China and Russia. Has it surprised you that they haven't come up until this point to their aid?
Actually, I'm not surprised at all. I'm not surprised at all because Russia never fulfills its alliance obligations. Armenia was a treaty ally. They went on screwing Armenia over and telling them, oh, no, no, we'll sanction you if you annex Nagorno Karabakh. And then when the Azeris attacked Nagorno Karabakh, they said, well, why didn't you annex it? Had you annexed it, we would have protected you. Well, they actually hit targets within Armenia the last time. And there was no CSTO. It's not worth the paper it's written on. China China's never been anybody's ally. They like free radicals who destabilize parts of the world, but never impose any burdens on them. So I don't think that is an issue right now.
You think that China ultimately will emerge as the biggest strategic beneficiary of this crisis?
Maybe. Maybe because, the Chinese positions, they're like, it almost, they seem to have built a Chinese wall between the bull and bear. They profit when there is a bull situation, they profit when there is a bear situation. And with them, I know for a fact, talking to people, to my friends in Beijing, they're observing the tactics and the weapons, especially the asymmetric tactics that Iran is using, very carefully, because they think with all their stock, they have a huge stock of outdated equipment. They can use it as, cover fire, essentially chaff and flares in any attack on Taiwan. So they're learning those lessons carefully. But other than that, what they see is a regime in Iran. If Iran is regime changed, they are going to be much more open, have much more money, and they will have to keep China happy. So they will have to buy from China. And even if it does not change and the current regime continues, they'll be even more dependent on China. So regime changes, more money for China. A regime doesn't change, more dependency on China. See, win-win situation. The Chinese are very good at this. I wish we were all like this. At the same time, I wish we weren't like this. But anyway,
Do you think that India is actually more concerned about China's positioning than about Iran itself?
no. I think we've never combined the two. We don't mix the two. We see them as two completely different problem sets because dependence doesn't actually convert into anything for us. Even purchases don't convert into anything for us. It's an issue for Israel and Iran's neighbors. It's not an issue for us. China is a standalone problem in its own right for totally different reasons. And at most, there's some knockdown effect on Pakistan.
Now, the United States has pressured India in the past over the energy purchases that they had from Iran. Does this crisis increase the US's leverage over India?
They seem to be announcing that they have leverage over India. But everybody I speak to in India is like, bro, show me where what document did we sign saying we're going to reduce energy purchases? We're buying about 1.2 million barrels from Russia. I mean, how have we reduced our purchases of Russian crude? There's been a reduction, there's been no drying up. And now it's going to shoot up again just because of the Americans and what they're doing in the Gulf. So, there's leverage, but there's also counter leverage out there. Um, the Americans would love, I think Trump would love to be seen to be pressurizing us, just like there are these two memos from Hillary Clinton and John Kerry saying, oh, thanks to our pressure, the Indians stopped or significantly reduced the purchase of Iranian oil. American pressure doesn't figure very highly on our list of priorities. It's more the pressure Americans exert on the commodities market that ends up determining our purchasing priorities.
So you don't think that there's a scenario where the US could push India to take, let's say, clearer sides in this conflict?
They can keep pushing. I mean, they wanted it really. My diplomat friends tell me they were never historically they had never been under more pressure than when Russia invaded Ukraine. And they managed to parry that pressure for a good 5 to 6 months because it wasn't just America, it was America plus the EU pressurizing us. And we parried it. We parried it pretty damn well. And they're very confident that they could, if they could deal with that, they're very confident they can deal with anything.
So what do you think is India's worst case scenario if this conflict spirals? Is it the regional war? Is it the oil? Is it the regime collapse in Iran?
With Iran, if there is a regime change, it's not a nightmare scenario. It's just a bad scenario which we will readapt to. The real nightmare scenario for India is some kind of a dirty bomb exploding at high altitude over the Gulf countries. That would be the real disaster for India. Where there is actual toxic irradiation of the atmosphere, maybe not in lethal quantities, but enough to create outward migration from the Gulf region. Uh, that would that would be devastating for us. I think that is the one scenario that we're very confident in our ability to say stabilize oil in a month. Uh, we'll bleed for a month, but we'll stabilize it after a month. We're very confident in our ability to, manage China, manage relations with Iran and the Gulf, but the panic in Iran scenario and a dirty bomb, that's the one. I mean, we don't even know how to go about dealing with that scenario.
You mentioned there's a little bit less than 10 million Indians that live and work across the Gulf. Do you think that that reality shapes India's foreign policy?
Very much so. Very much so. One of the reasons that, even at its peak, now we have good relations with the Saudis. But say, had you asked me the same question 10 years back, I would have told you Saudi Arabia is a bitter enemy. They're the puppet behind Pakistan and whatever. Even then, we would never go up against Saudi Arabia publicly. And it all has to do with the fact that when you have so many Indians working out there, it does create a certain hedge. You'd see this with Qatar as well. Qatar damages your interest. Qatar damages our interests. They host all kind. They host your terrorists. They host our terrorists. There's very little we can rationally do to the Qataris or say to the Qataris because of that hostage situation. I mean, voluntary hostage situation, but hostage situation nevertheless. So yes, India's foreign policy is kind of stuck in a sort of Stockholm syndrome-ish situation. Yeah.
At what point does this stop being a foreign policy issue and becoming more domestic policy, a political crisis inside India?
So it's always been a domestic issue as well. It's not really the foreign policy that's the issue, it's the domestic policy that's the issue because the remittances are huge. The economics of it are huge. There have been Shia protests. There were over 100 Shia protests. Some of them in the north in Kashmir were absolutely massive, like whole stadiums filled with mourners when Khamenei was killed. But it has not yet translated into a political crisis yet. I suspect if we are not able to control oil prices like we were not in 73, then you could have cascading effects, social effects, which then end up being a political crisis. But as of now, all the domestic implications have been fairly well contained or managed.
But do you think that there's a scenario where there could be mass evacuations and that becomes a real concern for India?
Absolutely. There is every situation where it could become that we have to bring back lots of people. I think they're already talking to all the private airlines because, there is the clause that we can temporarily nationalize them for emergency situations and things like that. We're hoping it doesn't come to that, but they are ready to do that. The plans have been reviewed. And we've got huge domestic airlines, so something like 700 aircraft flying internally, which technically 700 aircraft, say even with lots of luggage, you bring back 100 people, that's 70,000 uh, more. I mean, it's normally about 200. It's 180, so whatever. Let's keep it as 200 round off. So about 140,000 a day. We have the capacity to bring that back, 2-3 flights a day, maybe more. You can do the evacuation. We did an air evacuation from Yemen, and we did a much bigger air evacuation in 1990 from Iraq. There were lots of Indians in Iraq, about 200,000 Indians, and we evacuated all of them using the air bridge. So we're confident we can do it. It's just that it is a complete nightmare if we have to do it.
Now, how much influence do the Gulf monarchies have over India's diplomatic posture in crises like this?
Not much. Not much. We will avoid ruining our relations with them. We avoid criticizing them, but they can't force a course of action onto us that we don't want. The best they can do is temper down our language and nothing more than that. Historically, that's always been the case.
Now, I want to go back to Prime Minister Modi's visit to Israel. What were your thoughts with his visit, just in general?
Well, look, it's always going to be like very colorful, big, and love fest, right? So he didn't hold back on his love, and Bibi didn't hold back on his love. And even when Lapid and the opposition walked out for Bibi and Amir Ohana's speech, They came back for Modi's speech, and Lapid went and hugged him and stuff like that. So I was very happy with that. I think it basically shows you that it doesn't matter if it's left or right in Israel. India's always going to have a very good relationship with Israel, which is not the case in India. Because if you look at the clown who runs our opposition right now, the man is positively bipolar. He has no respect in policy circles. He talks so obtusely, nobody can understand him. His grandfather served in the German army in Operation Barbarossa, the Italian part of it, that was Army Group Center, which carried out the Babi Yar massacre. And you can see that anti-Semitism just runs through his entire family, through his sister, through his mother, everything. There's a very distinct line of that. So if the government actually changes in India, it won't be the same.
Do you think that he can really challenge Prime Minister Modi? How strong is the Prime Minister's support?
Look, the Prime Minister is very strong, but they're not terribly good at things. I think what contributed to victory after victory for Modi is the fact that Rahul Gandhi is so incompetent and inept. You're really counting on his mistakes rather than your greatness to keep winning elections. Now, assume there's a scenario where Rahul Gandhi is out of the picture. The Congress would come to power, but then the Congress also wouldn't be as ideological and schizo as it is right now, which is a good thing because then there would be policy continuity. But as long as Rahul Gandhi is around, if the government gets it horribly wrong, unless the government gets it horribly wrong, I don't see the chances of Rahul Gandhi coming to power.
So it seems like if anybody takes over for Prime Minister Modi, they would not be as openly pro-Israel as he is, right? Is that accurate?
No, from the BJP. The BJP has always been very openly pro-Israel. It's the Indian left that has been very openly anti-Israel. The Congress used to be anti-Israel in speech, but not in action. The other parties are actually hostile in both speech and action. Under Rahul Gandhi, the Congress has turned hostile both in speech and in action.
But before Prime Minister Modi took over, India was never openly pro-Israel, right? It was only after Prime Minister Modi took over.
No, it was pro-Israel in those 6 years of the Vajpayee administration, which was before, which was from what, 1996 to 2004. In those years, I don't know, 98 to 2004, India was pretty pro. It's been a process, but it was pretty pro-Israel. And, well, we don't consider it pro-Israel. We consider it pro-India. It's how you define the interests of India, really. The 10 years of the Congress government went anti-Israel, but there was a lot of verbal anti-Israel, not in action at all, to be very fair, because they do have a large Muslim vote bank, which they have to keep happy. Not that the Muslim vote bank ever votes on Israel issues. Israel has never been an election issue in India. It has never determined an election in India. But you have to play lip service to it, I guess. And the agreement, even with the Congress at that time under Manmohan Singh, was we will vote with Israel on all the operative resolutions of the UN, on all the non-operative resolutions, which have absolutely no tangible consequences. So, for example, if you have a resolution that says there should be economic measures for the boycotting of companies that have invested in Israel, India would vote no on that. If there was a resolution, just a normal, typical UN hateful resolution, Jews are evil people with fangs and big noses, and they eat our children for lunch, then India would vote, yeah, absolutely, man. We've seen you all, you have big noses and things. Because the actual consequences in the real world are exactly zero. And this used to be coordinated very carefully between the Israeli Foreign Ministry and the Indian Foreign Ministry on what was operational and what was not operational, no matter how nasty it was. So even the Congress, before Rahul Gandhi came about, was okay. It wasn't so blatantly in your face pro-Israel, but it was fine. I mean, the Israelis went unhappy with it. They were just like, well, we expect a bit more from our friends. But Rahul is dangerous. He's actually he's not just dangerous for Indian foreign policy, he's dangerous for economic policy, he's dangerous for domestic social policy, for everything.
Has there been, from this 200 million Muslim Indians, why is it that they're not going out for Palestine and doing these things?
No, they did a huge, I think the biggest rally for Gaza happened in India, in Kerala state, the southern state. The thing is, it's never gotten violent. It's never gotten violent, which I was surprised seeing that with the Sunnis, because it was mostly the Sunnis coming out and protesting for Gaza. And it was the Shias protesting for Khamenei, but without being violent. And I think it's good in a democracy, even if you don't agree with people's views on who they're protesting for or what they're protesting for, as long as you're not violent, it's fine. Like in that particular Gaza protest that happened in 23, sorry, they actually got, was it Khalid Meshal or some Hamas chap to give a speech? It was a pre-recorded speech, of course, because he won't dare give a live speech knowing that you chaps will find him and alter his health condition, for lack of a better word. Yeah, it was there. So they do protest, but it's not been violent. And we're quite, it's not like we have optimal relations with our Muslim minorities, but I think we've got very decent relationship with our Muslim minorities.
Abhijit, I want to thank you for your time, as always. If you can leave us off with your final message, the floor is yours.
Final message, please get some narrative control this time. You're losing the narrative in India, and it's more to do with the fact that Israelis aren't talking. Trump is doing all the talking, and Trump can't be talking for you here. We need Israelis talking about Israel in India. We can't have Trump talking about Israeli interests in India.
Thank you again, and wishing you all the best until we speak next time.
Thank
Thank
you,
you.
and wishing you all the best. I hope you achieve what you want, but keep in mind, we want something slightly different.
I hope we can get something that will work out for both of us.
Inshallah.
Inshallah. Okay, all the best.
If you have a 401k or an IRA, please listen. Gold is at record highs. What many people don't know is this: you can move part of your retirement money legally and without tax penalties into physical gold you actually own. Alpha Omega Gold helps you do this through a gold IRA. Your gold is real. It is stored safely. It is in your name. Learn more at ao.gold/stand. Alpha Omega Gold is our sponsor, and they proudly stand with Israel.